Hello everyone, Chamansin here. Okay, so today we're talking about Cacti Automation. Now, what is Cacti Automation? Cacti Automation allows us to create rules while the network is being scanned for new devices. So as Cacti scans a network, finds a particular device, then we can create device templates, we can associate it to a specific tree. So say you have a particular subnet that has one of your customers on it or something like that, and you're looking for a specific host name, for example. Then you can associate everything with a host name X to a specific tree. You can do all sorts of things. It's pretty powerful. And so let's go over a couple of examples on how you can use the automation engine. So on the main console, go down to automation, and you see all the various panes for automation. So the first thing let's draw our attention to is the networks tab. Okay, so the networks tab is where we put in the subnets we want to scan. So if we go over to the test network, we'll see that I have a test network and it's 192.168.1.0 with the CIDR notation of 24. Now we have various options that we can use here. So first of all, which data collector do we want to actually perform the scan? So I have multiple options here, right? So I only have in this setup a single polar. So I only have an option for main polar. But if you have a multipolar system, then all of them would be here. So like, polar 2, polar 3. So you can select that. And then which site. So you have the option in Cacti to create different sites. Building A, building B, building C. And so you can, or out of the box, there's core and edge. So I'll just select none for now. And then we can schedule. First of all, before we get to that, informationally, it tells you how many IPs it's going to scan. You have an option for like an alternate DNS server for name resolution. There's an automated scan schedule, so you can hit daily, weekly, monthly, or on a specific day of the month, right? And of course, manual. And so that's very powerful because say I have this scanning daily. As I put on more devices on my network, I can be rest assured that that the tool will automatically once a day run, scan, find new devices on the network, and automatically add them. You can actually alter that behavior too, that the automation scan would find devices and then put them into the discovered devices section for you to the next day or whenever you want, find the newly discovered devices and add them manually. So there's options such as NetBIOS, and then that one option I told you about where you can modify this behavior is automatically add to Cacti. So if you wanted to scan devices, discover them, but not add them right away, you would uncheck this. And then you have options to allow the same system name on different hosts and rerun data queries. Now, rerunning data queries, when a device is rediscovered, the automation will rerun the data query just to see if anything has changed, right? So maybe you configured another interface since then on a switch, or changed interface from down to you're using it again, something like that. It'll rerun that, right? And then you can have email notifications sent out to the administrator, and then this is where we can select the time on which we want the time and the day that we want the discovery to run. Okay, so if I want this to run at 10:30, I can select 10:30. Okay, and then it would run at 10:30, and then we have other options from there. Now, after all this is set up, we need to, because we're using SNMP, we need to tell it what SNMP credentials for it to use. So this SNMP option set, which we'll get to in one moment, we'll select the default option set. And then how do we want to determine if something's reachable? If it responds by a ping. So if it does respond by a ping, what it's going to do afterwards is try the SNMP to get the SNMP data from it. For example, if you have devices that don't respond to ping, maybe it's a network policy or something like that, you have other options. So you can see if a particular port is open, you can do UDP ping, even SNMP. So if something responds to an SNMP get, then you can select SNMP get. You have a SNMP, also known as an SNMP ping, right, to figure out what the value is and how many times you want that to happen before the system believes that that device is not reachable. Okay, so click save on that. So the next important thing is the SNMP options. Okay, so under SNMP options, under the default SNMP set, this is where we put in our SNMP strings that we're going to use to scan the network. So by default, there's public and private. So if I have, say, another SNMP string that my devices are configured for, then I would put them here. Now, Cacti will support versions 1 to 3, right? So if I have version 2 and I want to put in, test string as my SNMP string, the community string, I'll put in there. Normally, these defaults work, and if you have something customized on your network, then definitely try that out or alter as needed. Okay, and then click save. So what happens when a device is discovered, right? The automation will cycle through these community strings, right? And so if one of these community strings allows us to start grabbing data, then it moves on, right? So now that we have that, right, we have all that set up. The next step is determining what kind of device the automation has found. So out of the box, we have a rule for Cisco routers, Windows devices, generic, all that things, right? So let's take our attention to the Cisco router. So the Cisco router, in this case, we have a regex. So we use Perl regex to find based on the system description. So when you log into a Cisco switch, so let's log into a Cisco switch to find this. So when we do show version, right, on a Cisco switch, notice how our regex is looking for a Cisco iOS software or iOS. It's matching on this regex because, you know what? Even though there's many different versions of Cisco iOS gear, even though there's all those variations, the one thing that they do have pretty standard is this banner. So there's a lot to match on that. So this rule out of the box works, finding, you guessed it, SNMP, the SNMP header for Cisco devices. Now, after this is set, we can actually modify this. So say we don't have a Cisco, we're not looking at Cisco, right? We can create a rule. So first thing we would need is, before this, we'd have to go to templates, then device templates. And then we'd have to create a template for our other devices. So say Juniper. Okay. And so for Juniper devices, we are looking for say we want to know SNMP interface stats. Okay, so you would create that quickly under templates and then device, and then go back to automation and device rules. So now what we're going to do is create a rule based off of that device template, so Juniper. And then you say the availability method. So we want SNMP uptime. Now, I prefer SNMP uptime versus the others, the ping and SNMP. Reason being, for me, is that I want to know if something has gone wrong with the SNMP agent, and that it's not just responding to ping, because you can have an option like if you just selected ping, right, and say a device is pingable but not responding to SNMP for some reason, that device would show up, and what could happen is that the device shows up, but you won't get any data because SNMP is not working. So you can do either SNMP uptime or ping and SNMP uptime. So both have to be true for the device to show reachable. Okay, but I'm going to stick with the default for now, SNMP uptime. And so let's say I was looking for something for Juniper. So I'm looking for Junos, right? I don't actually have a Juniper router or switch here, but to illustrate what we do here. So we're going to match on the system description. Okay. You can also have the system name. So say, you have a standardized config for your Junipers, and say it's hostname _ Juniper, right? You can actually look for just Juniper, and as long as that is in the system name, then it would be a match. Okay, so now that that's done, we need to tell the automation system, okay, you've come across, say, a Cisco router. Okay, now what happens when you come across a Cisco router? What graphs do we create? So you can go to Graph Rules, top right-hand corner, click Add with the plus, and then you can put traffic, for example. So we want to create traffic graphs using the data query for SNMP interface statistics. Okay, now we want to know what kind of graphs we want to create. So there are very different ones. So you can do multicast graphs, you can do graphs in bits and bytes, 95th percentile, all that stuff. So I'm going to do in and out bits, a 64-bit. Okay, make sure to enable the rule. So now we want to come up with a criteria on selecting the device to make these graphs. Okay, so click the plus, and we have various field names. So some extract SNMP data in order to identify what device to choose, and some just go based on the Cacti data, so description, host name, right? So if we go by SNMP data, okay, so I can go by system description, right, or system name. So if I go system description, and I can say, system description contains, what's the switch name here? Mancini. So if I do the system description contains the word Mancini, I can put that there. Now let's see how that actually affects anything. So if I go show matching devices, because say I already have one in here, I can do that to see if it matches any device in the system. Okay. So if I go to management devices, You see that I have Mancini and, oh, I know what I did here. So sorry, if we go to back to graph rules, traffic, okay, we will do, sorry, system name, and hit save. Okay, so it's not, system description would be looking at, you know, that Cisco iOS thing. I'm looking at the name that I'm looking at the system name that's been given to, like, the host name of the device. So see, I have two of them already in here, which is that switch I was just logged into. Now, I want to know. Okay, so once I have that device that I'm matching, what's the next step? Okay, I'm going to create graphs, but what graphs do I want to create on what interfaces, right? So I hit add under graph creation criteria, and I have different fields here. So for example, let's say I want to create graphs on interfaces that are up, right? So I'm going to say I only want to create graphs on interfaces that are in up status. So I'll just put that the IF interface operation status contains up, okay? And then show matching objects. When I do show matching objects, I see all of the ports that are in up status, and all these would be a match. So the automation system would find this device. It would match the device criteria. Then it would go to the graph rules. Then match, okay, Cisco device named Mancini that has that has interfaces status. They always have to be up, right? In order to create the graphs. And of course, if you want to create graphs for every interface, even the ones that are down, you can also do that too, right? You would have to create more logic that says, you know, maybe IF operator status, right? I would put the OR operator contains down, right? And then even the ones that are down would show up as well, right? So now that we have all of that, we can then create tree rules. So tree rules, as the name suggests, allows us to create rules to organize these devices into trees. So let's see how that is. So if I go to add, and I can say Mancini tree rule, right? Let's just name something quick. Right, and how do I want this? So we're going to put the device on a tree, okay, with the graph template. Hit create. Right, so which tree? So we're just going to put on the default tree, right? And once we have this default tree, then we can now create rules on what devices end up on this tree. So let's go to object selection criteria, click add, and based on field name. So let's go back to our field name, system name, contains. So any device, again, that has that Mancini in it, if I go to show eligible objects, will show up on the default tree. Now, I already have a default tree and there's already stuff in it. So how about if I want to change this to create a tree, let's say a Mancini tree. So I go to Management, Trees, and then I can create a tree, going Add Tree. So say Mancini is the name of the tree I want, and how do I want it ordered? Let's say alphabetic. Okay, so I'm going to create this tree, click Edit Tree, okay, publish the tree, and then click Finish Editing Tree. Back to Automation, Tree Rules, and if I go to the Mancini tree rule, I can now select the tree that goes to Mancini. So now this tells the automation software, okay, once you've matched this, I want all this to go to the Mancini tree, and enable the rule. Ensure that you always enable the rule, or else when you run automation, it will not take effect. Okay, so now let's go back again. So tree rule, the Mancini tree rule is enabled. Graph rule, right? Traffic, that is enabled. Device rule, right? So we have everything there. Okay, so let's run a network scan. So when I run a network scan, you will see that you get a progress on how many IPs have been scanned. Now notice here how many threads. So 10 threads mean that we're going to scan 10 IPs at once. Okay, so you can go up to 50 threads and scan 50 IPs at once. Now, the more threads that you open up, just be careful because you'll have to tune, especially your MySQL database, because it's going to open up a lot more connections. If that's a busy subnet and there's a lot of devices on it that are new, and then you can easily fill up how many connections you have on your SQL database. Right? So under up hosts, SNMP hosts, so up means that the device is showing up, and SNMP means it's also responding to SNMP. You can see the progress in the logs. So if I go over to log, you'll see that, hey, it actually went ahead and is starting to add graphs for the Mancini device. Okay, because I have that rule saying down, which I didn't have before, right? So it's actually going to all the interfaces that I had that were down. And remember, I said that even if the device is in the system, it will rerun that data query and still find those interfaces that are down. It will also process those graph rules that I put in place, all that stuff, right? So as it's scanning there and doing its thing, right? Let's go over to the graphs tab, and then under tree rules, trees, sorry. Okay, so what we want to do is, I don't think it did it yet. Okay, so go over to management into trees. So currently right now, no devices showed up on the Mancini tree, so it's still running its automation. So let's give it a moment. So that switch had an IP of 1.253, so it's pretty much right at the end of the subnet. So it should be done in a couple of seconds here. Okay, and so while that's doing that, another thing to note is that when you go to now that you have automation rules in place, say you want to apply, so you have an existing device, right, and you want to apply these new rules to that device. You don't have to do a full network scan. So you can just select the device that you want to run automation rules against. At the bottom right hand corner, click the drop down, click apply automation rules, click continue. So what happens now is the automation rules are run on these devices. So again, we're probably creating a bunch of thresholds and devices and all this stuff going on, right? So it takes a bit, and now it should be done. So now if I go over to graphs, there's that Mancini tree. And so that Mancini tree that I created was all put in there by automation, right? I didn't have to do that manually. If I go over to graphs, you'll see that there are a bunch of new graphs. They're all because, first of all, they're all brand new, so there is no data. And at the most, you would get 0 anyways because those interfaces are down. So now that the automation's done, let's just go over to console. Let's be sure that it's run its course. Okay, it's done. So let's go over to the last section we want to talk about, which is the discovered devices. Okay, so now on that network, it discovered all those, it discovered the devices and it added them, right? And on my lab network here, I don't have much, right? So if I go over to networks, and let's say we want to scan a network that we'll find more devices on. So we'll do 1.1.1.0, which there's a bunch of devices that respond there, right? And we'll have the name and then put that into the subnet. We're going to enable this rule, but I'm not going to put automatically add to Cacti. Okay. I'm also just going to ask automation to do an ICMP ping because obviously the devices I'm scanning, they will not respond to SNMP, right? So I'm going to create and let's scan that network. Okay, so it's a /29, so it should be fairly quick. So while that's running, I can already start. Okay, so it's done actually. If I go over to discover devices, this is an example where you would see this if you scanned your network, and as you're scanning your network, say the SNMP options that you set, there's a device that doesn't have any of the community strings that you have in place, right? So if it did respond to SNMP, it would show up, right? However, it would not be able to add it. You'll notice here under device name, it will be none detected. There won't be any information, SNMP info, because it doesn't have the community string. So what you would do in this case is that, okay, you know what? I want to correct this. It's a one-off or something like that. Or, hey, I scan a subnet and all of them come back. So maybe you fat-fingered or have the wrong SNMP string or the wrong SNMP version 3 password or something like that, right? You would go back and correct that. But let's say it's a one-off. I can select this one device, choose an action. I can add that device, right? Which polar I want to put it on. Okay. what kind of device is it. So it's a Cisco router. Keep with the theme and click continue. So once you click continue, we added 1.1.1.6 management, then devices, and 1.1.1.6 is there. So now I'll come back to there and I'll finish up the configuration of this. Okay, so I will change it from I'll change the availability method. Okay, so under SNMP version, it says not in use. So say it was version 2 and the community string was public. So I'll just fill in that info. Click save. Right, it's obviously not going to respond. And then once I've done that, you may need to run the data query, which queries the device for interfaces and all the monitoring points for that particular data query. Okay. And then you would save, and then the device would work. Okay. So I really hope this this video helped explain the automation feature of Cacti. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and have a nice day.